This week, AI stopped feeling like a contest over who has the smartest chatbot and started feeling like a contest over who controls the pipes, the platforms, and the rules. In just a few days, we saw Nvidia try to define the infrastructure layer. OpenAI push deeper into daily work. China accelerate on agents. Europe and the UK move harder on safety and rights. And Russia signal that AI may become another border-controlled technology. So the big question this week is not just, what can AI do? It is, who gets to shape how AI shows up in everyday life, in business, and in society? That is a thread running through all 10 stories we're covering today. Let's start with the first story, Nvidia and the real AI choke point. Everybody keeps talking about smarter AI. Nvidia spent this week reminding everyone that smarter AI is useless if you cannot afford to run it. At GTC, Jensen Huang leaned hard into the idea that the next wave is not just chatbots, but always-on agents doing work across software and devices, and he paired that with a massive outlook for AI chip demand. Why does that matter in plain English? Because this tells us where the money is actually flowing. A lot of people still think the AI race is mainly about model quality. Nvidia is saying the real winners may be the companies that own compute, power, and deployment infrastructure. And for ordinary people, that means the future of AI may be shaped less by what is possible in theory, and more by who can pay for the hardware and electricity to keep these systems running at scale. And that takes us directly to the next story, because once the infrastructure race intensifies, the next question becomes, who is building the interface people will actually live inside? Now the second story, OpenAI is trying to become the place where work happens. OpenAI had one of those weeks that looks scattered at first, until you realize it all points in one direction. It launched GPT 5.4 Mini and Nano for faster, cheaper coding and tool use, announced it would acquire Astral to strengthen codecs, and Reuters reported that ads are coming to US free and Go users. Separate moves, same signal. OpenAI is not just improving a model, it is building a work platform. Why should a layman care? Because this is what platform lock-in looks like at the AI layer. The more your coding, writing, searching, browsing, and task execution happen inside one assistant, the harder it becomes to leave. For business, that is a huge monetization story. For society, it means a small number of AI products could become the main gateway through which people do digital work. And once that happens, the incentives of those platforms matter a lot more. And while OpenAI is trying to become that default interface in the West, China is racing toward a slightly different version of the same future. The third story is about how China's AI race is shifting from talking to doing. One of the most important international signals this week came from China, where Baidu launched OpenClaw-based agents. Alibaba rolled out its enterprise agent platform Wukong, and the mystery model many people thought came from DeepSeek turned out to be Xiaomi. The bigger story here is that Chinese firms are moving fast on AI systems designed to act, not just answer. That matters because agentic AI is much easier to imagine as infrastructure for daily life. It can update spreadsheets, manage documents, coordinate software, and connect across devices. For business, this means the next software fight may not be app versus app, but ecosystem versus ecosystem. For society, it means AI is becoming less of a novelty you visit and more of a layer quietly embedded into the tools people already use every day. And once AI becomes that embedded, governments start getting nervous about who sets the rules. Now on to the fourth story. Washington wants one national AI rulebook. The White House put out a legislative framework urging Congress to create a single national approach to AI instead of letting every state make its own rules. The framework talks about child safety, electricity and data center growth, intellectual property, workforce issues, and keeping the U.S. competitive. The business meaning here is easy to understand. Companies want one rulebook, not 50. That lowers compliance headaches and makes it easier to scale nationally. But the societal question is more interesting. When government says, let's avoid fragmentation so innovation can move faster, the hidden question is always, faster for whom and with what guardrails? This is really a debate over whether we are designing AI policy around public protection or around industrial acceleration first and public protection later. And that same tension shows up in our next story, where the fight is not over states versus Washington, but over platforms versus the open web. On the fifth story, Google's AI search fight is really about who gets value from the internet. Google said it is developing controls that would let websites opt out of some generative AI uses in search, partly in response to pressure from the UK competition regulator. On paper, that sounds technical. In reality, it goes to the heart of how value is being redistributed on the web. For years, websites tolerated Google because search sent them traffic. But if AI-generated answers keep users on Google while still learning from publisher content, then publishers may be providing the raw material without getting the visit. That is why this story matters. For business, it could reshape traffic, SEO, publishing, and digital advertising. For society, it is about whether the open web remains an ecosystem people can actually survive in, or becomes a background data source for machines that answer on top of it. And once you start asking who controls information, the next question becomes even more personal. What happens when AI controls people's likeness, identity, and reputation? On the sixth interesting story for this week, Europe, the UK, and XAI all pointed to the same thing. Trust is breaking at the human level. This week, Europe backed moves against apps that generate non-consensual explicit images. The UK moved toward possible labeling of AI-generated content and stronger protections around digital replicas. And XAI was sued by Tennessee plaintiffs who say Grok enabled sexualized images made from real photos, including minors. These are different jurisdictions, but they are reacting to the same reality. The harms are no longer theoretical. This is where a layperson can really feel the issue. When AI can fake your body, fake your voice, or fake your identity, AI safety stops sounding like an expert debate and starts sounding like a consent problem, a dignity problem, and a family problem. For business, this means trust and liability are now core product issues. For society, it means one of the biggest tests of AI may be very simple. Can people still feel safe being seen online? And from there, the next layer of trust is not about images. It is about the content AI was built on in the first place. The copyright fight is getting harder to ignore. BMG sued Anthropic, alleging that Claude was trained on copyrighted lyrics from artists including Bruno Mars, Ariana Grande, and the Rolling Stones, with the complaint citing hundreds of examples. This is part of the bigger copyright wave against AI firms, but it is especially powerful because music makes the issue feel concrete. Why this matters is pretty simple. AI companies need vast amounts of data. Creators want to know whether their work is being taken, licensed, or compensated. So the real question underneath this case is, can the current AI boom continue under its present training habits? Or does the entire economics of model building start to change if courts force permission and payment? For business, that could mean much higher input costs. For society, it is a fairness question about whether creative labor is quietly underwriting the next tech platform without consent. And if that sounds like a fight over culture, the next story shows how quickly AI is also becoming a fight over force. On another interesting one, military AI is becoming normal far faster than the public conversation suggests. The Pentagon plans to make Palantir's Maven system a formal program of record, which means this is not just another experiment or one-off contract. It signals stable funding, deeper integration, and a more permanent role for AI in military analysis and operations. This is one of those stories that people can miss because it sounds bureaucratic. But program of record is exactly the kind of phrase that tells you something is becoming institutional. For business, that means defense AI is no longer speculative, it is a durable market. For society, it means AI-assisted warfare is moving from exceptional to normal. And that shift often happens long before the public has had a serious democratic conversation about where the line should be. To balance that out, the next story shows AI being used in a way many people actually hope for. Healthcare gave us the most hopeful, large-scale deployment of the week. Roche said it expanded its AI computing capacity with more than 2,100 Nvidia Blackwell chips across the US and Europe to support drug and diagnostics development. This was one of the clearest examples this week of AI moving beyond demos and into serious industrial use. Why does this one land differently? Because most people are willing to tolerate a lot of hype if they can eventually see a real-world benefit. In healthcare, the promise is easier to grasp: faster analysis, faster modeling, potentially faster drug development. For business, it shows where enterprise AI spending starts to make practical sense. For society, it is a reminder that the same computing race, raising energy and access concerns, could also produce gains that matter to patients and families, if those benefits are shared widely enough. And then the final story brings us back to the global picture, because not every country is responding to AI by opening up. Finally, Russia is treating AI like a sovereignty issue. Russia proposed rules that could ban or restrict foreign AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini unless they comply with domestic requirements, including data localization and broader state control. This is part of a much larger pattern in which AI is increasingly being treated not just as a product, but as strategic infrastructure. For business, this points to a more fragmented AI economy, where companies may need different products, different compliance strategies, and even different data practices country by country. For society, it means access to AI may start to depend less on what tool is best and more on what your government allows. In other words, the internet gave us a sense of one connected digital world. AI may be taking us towards something more divided. So if you zoom out, this week gave us 4 different AI futures at the same time. The US is pushing scale and national coordination. China is pushing agents and ecosystem speed. Europe and the UK are pushing rights, safety, and traceability. Russia is pushing control and localization. And that is the real takeaway for ordinary people and business leaders alike. AI is no longer just improving. It is splitting into different political, commercial, and social models. So the question is not only which company wins, it is which version of the AI future we end up living inside. That is your AI Roundup for the week of March 15th to March 21st, 2026. Like this video, comment, and subscribe for more weekly AI impact updates.